1 in 5 suffer.
Erase the stigma.
Brain difference is not a crime.
Mental health isn't just your problem.
It's our problem.
And now, Mental Health Mondays with Marla and Dave.
Welcome to Mental Health Mondays. We are Marla and Dave.
That's right.
And that never changes. There's some things that change in the world, but what doesn't change is that I am always Marla.
And I'm always Dave. Today's show is brought to you by the Kiloby Center for Recovery, the Mindful Revolution in Addiction Treatment, and the Natural Rest House Detox Residential Center. The number is 833-474-4064, and we got a special show planned for you today.
Always. You know, as we sit here preparing to have one of the conversations monthly that I look forward to most, honestly, because Scott always leaves us with great nuggets, I just want you to pay attention to Scott's mindful environment. I feel like that he exudes
when
peace.
you see it, you will understand what Marla is talking about. We want to remind you that today we are giving away Scott's List. And as a matter of fact, I just branded that. Scott's List.
Scott's List.
That's a thing. 5 steps for calming your nervous system. You have to call 866-545-6295 or email info@kilobycenter.com. Make sure you say that you heard about these 5 steps for calming your nervous system from Mental Health Monday.
All right. So as we said, Scott Kiloby is an internationally recognized and sought-after author, teacher, speaker on the subject of mindfulness and non-dual wisdom as it applies to addiction and other mental illnesses or brain differences. Scott is the founder of the Living Inquiries community and the founder and CEO of the Kiloby Center for Recovery, located in the beautiful Palm Springs area of California. As a regular guest, Scott educates us. He helps to explain how to apply mindfulness in your everyday life. This week, Scott will help us, as Dave said, break down those. Scott will help us not only with the 5 tips for
5 steps on calming your
right.
nervous system. And when we come back, Scott Kiloby, we're looking
right
forward
back.
to it.
Help someone who is struggling by supporting the National Alliance on Mental Illness and be a part of the NAMI effect. Hope starts with you.
All right, we are back as promised. We welcome our guest, Scott Kiloby. You'll hear that in just a second. There you go.
And I also want to always extend an invitation and a welcome to those who are following us and who are interactive on the Loving Beyond Reason page on the Facebook.
Absolutely.
They're here. They're here as well.
So, Scott, we're going to jump right in. We see that you're in a very peaceful environment back there.
How do you do it, Scott? At one point when as we go forward in our relationship, your relationship with Mental Health Mondays and David and I honestly, show me the ways. Like I'm not even trying to be funny. I am, but I'm not.
Yeah. I live in an RV, so it's very easy to find nature wherever I go, and I do like that. And it goes with mindfulness because the hustle and bustle and the noise of everyday living isn't around, so it's quiet and peaceful. Nice.
Yeah, so you have reduced you've eliminated the noise pollution aspect to everyday living. I love that.
Yeah.
And so let me ask you a question. What I was going to get to as well, because I tend to have a very loud, harsh voice. Did your calm tone come with mindfulness? Is that like created and practiced, or is that just you?
I probably always had that voice. I was a singer before this, but I think when I did so many practices to calm my own nervous system and quiet my mind, my voice became just naturally more meditative. And I've been doing this for a long time,
Yeah.
With people. So when I'm helping people, I try to talk in a meditative voice, just to soothe them, and so that they're not, you want that kind of voice when you're doing mindfulness, something that's not irritating you or making you react to it. So I don't know. I just talk this way, I guess.
And we love it. So, Scott, when I say we were jumping right in, about 75% of people with addiction issues, it's well known that they also have usually co-occurring mental health issues as well. And when it comes to those of us who care for people who deal with addiction, loved ones, whether they be children or whether they be parents or siblings or just people that you love, partners that deal with addiction issues, a lot of times it's difficult for us, and we're so stressed out because the expectations that we have of someone else's behavior, whether that be a good or a bad thing, just aren't met. And so we usually deal with disappointment and stress almost as much as some of the ones that we care about and that we love that are dealing with the addiction and the mental health issues. And so we need you to help us figure out how we can change our paradigm so that we're not looking at our kids, our loved ones, as just delinquents.
Yes. Well, we're talking about behavioral health. That's what it's called. And I think it's different than like medical issues like cancer or diabetes, because there's not as much stigma around that. But because this involves behavior and the brain and the mind, it's very easy to not see that it's a mental health issue and to treat it as this is a person acting out, partying, and you really need to see it as a mental illness, or the person that's experiencing that could experience shame and feeling punished and judged for something that's really at that time is out of their control. You see, it's a mental health issue.
And
until
that's
they get help.
And that's really hard for at least a lot of times for even me to accept. I have to literally, it's like just taking my normal rigid paradigm and just deciding that the lights are on, but I'm going to consider it dark in here. That's what it feels like, if that makes any sense, or vice versa. So that when I see one of my kids going to the club and hanging out, doing drugs, how can I not see that as delinquent behavior versus, you know what, this person can't help this, when it seemed like they sure got in the, before there seemed like any mania was going on, they were ironing their clothes. They were preparing to go out and do this, if that makes any sense. So to say that they can't help it, it's a whole different paradigm that most of us just aren't ready to accept.
We're not ready to accept it. And the thing I wanted to mention, this is coming up for me too, is we know from working with people at the Kiloby Center that shame, the feeling of shame, is actually a driver for mental health and addiction. So the way that we talk to people who have mental health, we have to be mindful of how we're talking to them, because how we're talking to them, if we're anxious or angry, that gets picked up by them and becomes a driver. It could actually make the mental health issue worse, actually.
So then our reaction to their behavior is actually just exacerbating the symptoms that they're already dealing with. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, because as we study this, like from interior awareness, we see that certain stories in the mind and feelings drive addiction and make mental health issues worse. And one of the drivers that we keep seeing is shame. And when we bring it up in mindfulness to examine it, we see that it comes from family members and friends who had the best of intentions, but the way that they delivered the message was traumatizing to the person. It affected them and did make it more, because it made them feel worse about themselves. And then, of course, self-medicating is what we do.
Right,
when we
you're
feel
trying
bad
to
about
escape.
ourselves.
Exactly. Well, you know what? So having been, everybody knows our story, and I will, just for someone who's showing up today, remind, that was definitely a chapter for David and I when we were dealing with our son before we knew the depth of his issues, and there was drug addiction first. And I want you to kind of help me and help us, those of us who are at the beginning stages before we understand this, to just give us a couple of things, if you could, to just help us change that paradigm and move from that moment, because it is very hard to do, especially, I will speak from a parent standpoint who sees the behavior, you see the potential, and you see the harm. And to be honest, I guess what I would ask you to do is, I now have identified over time that was, for me, was driven by fear. Help us manage our fear enough to be effective.
Right. You hit the nail on the head. So one thing you can do in the moment is the 5 steps that I talked about.
Okay.
We'll probably talk about in a second. That's like a temporary and emergency measure when you're feeling really anxious, like you say, or fearful, and you're about to talk to your loved one. Just stepping back and doing this breathing exercise can calm things down so that you can come from a different place emotionally. That's one thing you can do. There are a lot of things you can do in the moment. They're all having to do with mindfulness and way beyond what we're talking about today. But the bigger thing I would say to people is, if you can see the treatment episode, the whole treatment experience, as it's not just about the person getting treatment, it's the whole family dynamic, because we know that these mental health issues come partly from genetics and partly from environment. So whatever happened in the family unit, the parents can't be blamed, but the family unit plus the genetics help to create this mental health issue. So we have to be aware of that when we then go to help a loved one, when it was actually created within the dynamics of the home family. So if we've traumatized kids before in certain ways, and that contributed to mental health issues, if we traumatize them again when they start self-medicating on that, then we're doing more harm. So we really have to work on ourselves, we, the parents and the loved ones.
Now, I'm going to just say this, Scott. The way that you phrased that was... It was amazing to me in this sense.
Masterful.
Basically, what you're saying, we need to take a holistic approach to treating the individual problem or mental health issue or addiction issue. In other words, there are things that the family is doing that's also exacerbating the person that we think is the one that needs all the help. So in essence, the system needs help so that the
heal
individual
the pie and not the
heal
slice.
the family. And Marla, you said that. Say that again.
Heal the pie, not just a slice.
Man, I
There you
love
go.
that.
I like
So,
that.
Scott, when we come back, we're going to eventually get you to walk us through those 5 steps to calming our nervous system. And we will also talk about how we can take what you just told us and make it a permanent shift for the entire family. We'll be right back with Scott Kiloby.
When Dave and Marla get together, it's hot.
You may not realize it, but these words, often used to describe someone with a mental health condition, can be very harmful. In a country where 1 in 5 people are affected by a mental health condition, it's time for all of us to step up and change the conversation. Just because someone's struggle isn't obvious on the outside doesn't mean they aren't hurting on the inside. We need to see the person, not the condition. Join with me, pledge to be stigma-free.
The Kiloby Center for Recovery is the first primarily mindfulness-based addiction, depression, and anxiety treatment center in the U.S. The non-12-step approach is based on founder Scott Kiloby's book, Natural Rest for Addiction.
The Kiloby Center is located in the beautiful community of Palm Springs, California, and provides 24-hour care for individuals seeking addiction treatment and step-down programs to help clients integrate back into their daily lives.
A recipient of the Joint Commission's Gold Seal of Approval for Behavioral Health Care Accreditation, the Kiloby Center for Recovery is proud to display this symbol of quality that reflects the organization's commitment to providing safe and effective care.
Over 84% of clients reported complete relief from symptoms of trauma, and 95.7% of clients reported complete relief from anxiety. Over 87% of the Kiloby Center's recovery clients reported complete relief from depression, and 100% of clients who presented with suicidal thoughts when they first came to the Kiloby Center for Recovery left with no suicidal thoughts at all.
Needless to say, the Kiloby Center for Recovery's mindfulness-based methods are effective.
If you or someone that you know and love suffers from addiction, depression, anxiety, or dual diagnosis, OCD, or general unhappiness in life, please, we ask, contact the Kiloby Center for Recovery today by calling 866-545-6295 or visit the website kilobycenter.com or contact them by email at info@kilobycenter.com today.
It's time for the Mental Health Minute with Marla and Dave.
Some have asked, what causes mental illness? As far as we know, there is no single cause for mental illness. A number of factors can contribute to risk for mental illness, such as
early adverse life experiences, such as trauma or a history of abuse. For example, child abuse, sexual assault, witnessing violence, etc. Experiences related to other ongoing chronic medical conditions such as cancer or diabetes, biological factors such as genes or chemical imbalances in the brain, use of alcohol or recreational drugs, having few friends, having feelings of loneliness or isolation.
Here are the 5 warning signs of mental illness. 1, long-lasting sadness or irritability. 2, extreme high and low moods, mood swings. Excessive fear, worry, or anxiety. Number 4, social withdrawal. Number 5 is dramatic changes in eating or sleeping habits.
And again, if you or anyone you know and love is suffering from any of these symptoms, please seek professional mental help. This message is brought to you by Mental Health Mondays and Loving Beyond Reason.
David is a thinker.
I never do anything without thinking about it first.
Marla is a feeler.
I basically wear my personality on my sleeve.
But when Marla and Dave get together, it's like a match dancing with a firecracker.
All right, so we are back as promised with
To talk
Scott
about the pie.
Kiloby and Marla. Say that thing about the pie one more time.
I was
Whipped
just-
cream. What is it?
I did. Okay. I said that the goal is to actually heal the whole pie, not just one slice.
Yeah, absolutely. And Scott, what you were describing as dealing with all of the contributing factors that family and friends can actually add into the circumstance with dual diagnosis, people dealing with addiction and mental health issues. But we were talking before that about the resentment that can build up when you're dealing with this type of thing and what we can do. So before we get you to take us through the 5 steps for calming your nervous system, what do we do with that resentment that can build up time and time again? We experience the same behaviors. And a lot of times, instead of saying, the person is not well and dealing with it from that perspective, we can feel like this person is doing this to me. This person has no desire to consider my feelings, and they're staying up all night. They're stealing my stuff. They're breaking the house up. They're just laying around. They're not contributing to the household in any way. They're just, sometimes it feels like they could just be burdens. How do you deal with that resentment that can build up?
So we tell stories in our minds, right, about what's happening in a situation. So you mentioned a lot of different stories of what we perceive happening, like they're partying or they're being difficult or challenging. What we do with our method is we pull those thoughts up into our awareness and we observe them until they dissolve. So all the stories that are not helpful get dissolved, so that what's left is the truth. The truth is that someone there with a mental health issue that needs help. All the other stuff, like I'm afraid, or they're doing this, that's just the emotional and psychological stuff on top of that. So we have to deal with that as loved ones. We have to deal with our own anxiety, right? Because if we don't, we bring that anxiety to them when we talk to them.
So now, is that something that you usually do when people come out to the Kiloby Center, is actually take family members through the same processes that you're taking the affected loved one through?
Yeah, because the family member is often experiencing their own trauma from this situation. So they're dealing with resentments, as you say, or like holding on to anger or anxiety, or stories there's something wrong with them, like they're a bad parent. So we have to help them, because that's the dynamic that went on in the family unit growing up that created the mental illness. We want everybody to heal, so the whole family. But the issue is that not all families want to come to treatment, because we often think that the issue is just the person seeking treatment.
Yeah.
So it's a hard argument to get an entire family involved, but we love it when that happens.
It is very difficult to literally, when you're dealing in the middle of that, to not ever say, this is not my problem. It's your problem. You're the one with the issue. But the reality is, no human comes here by themselves. Right. No human grows themselves into any state of consciousness or accountability. In other words, every baby comes with a clean noodle neck slate. They're just...
And in reality, correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, what I hear you describing is, yes, that person might have an issue that's affecting me negatively, but my reaction to that problem is affecting that person negatively, and we just downward spiral into a chaos that a lot of times, if you don't seek help, does not end well.
That's right. Sometimes I say, just compare how you would treat a family member who has cancer
to
how you're treating this person. Look at the differences, and the differences are often emotional, and they come down to these stories like, I'm afraid of what's going to happen. We often have the fear when someone has a cancer diagnosis, but we don't act the same way as we often do when someone has a mental health issue, because we don't recognize it as a mental health issue sometimes, like you say.
We categorize that very differently.
So now we are building up to the point where you walk us through the 5 steps. And when we come back from this next break, you're going to actually take us through the 5 steps. And then we'll describe what it is that we feel. Those of you that are watching at home, you can describe what it is that you're feeling as well. And then we will let Scott, as he takes us through this, sort of tell us afterwards what we should expect and how often we could do this exercise to give us some relief. We'll be right back with more from our friend Scott Kiloby. Okay, you know that fun music and what it means. Marla, what time is it?
It's time for me to break dance, Dave, but there's not enough room. So
Okay,
I can do
well,
this in my chair.
That's one way of saying it. What that means is it's pole time, and we have a pole dancer that actually goes through her gyrations and moves with no pole. It's ironic. Anyway, Marla, what was our question last week?
Do you think that I'll ever get an award for being a great chair dancer? Anyway, I digress. Last week we asked what percentage of U.S. adults suffer from anxiety disorders. The options were A, 19%, B, 27%, or C, 34%. And as usual, we give our esteemed guests the opportunity to ask or to answer the question, even though we now have an answer. So, Scott, I'll ask it again straight to you.
Yes, I want to say the 30-something, but I want to go with the 20 number, actually.
Our son last week said it was 24%. We 27. Are 27%. Scott, we're happy to give the results, and we're getting a little bit better, only 19%. Now, I would have to say this was pre-pandemic.
Yeah, this is pre-COVID.
So I'm sure that those numbers have actually risen considerably, but before the pandemic, 19% of U.S. adults suffered from anxiety disorders. The new poll question for next week is, if your diet regularly includes highly processed, fried, and sugary foods or drink, how much higher is your risk of developing depression? Now again, if your diet is you just eat unhealthy, you eat highly processed foods, fried, sugary foods, and drinks, and sodas, how much higher is your risk for developing depression? A, 35%, B, 48%, or C, 60%?
And Scott, let it be said that on Mental Health Mondays, we're a show of second chances. Sir, what would you say?
What was the 50 number? Was what? 50?
It was 35%, 48%, and
or
60%.
I'm going to go with 48.
Now, this is the cliffhanger one.
Yeah, we can't give the answer this week, but I think you're on the right track. Anyway, we all know it is best to stay away from foods that aren't good for you.
Agree.
Organic, whole foods, those are the best things. Now, remember the 5 tips suggestions and tips on dealing with a loved one struggling with addiction, and the 5 steps that will help you get to calming your nervous system. We're giving it away right here, Mental Health Mondays and the Kiloby Center.
We'll be right back.
All right, Scott, the moment has arrived. We need you to walk us through calming our nervous system. And this is
now, many of you, by the way, and I know this from personal phone calls, have reached out and you have gotten and really find the tips to be effective. And so we're going to go through them.
This is your chance for Scott himself to actually walk us
Correct.
through those steps. So, Scott, we're going to actually do what you tell us to do.
Well, first, just know when you use this would be, for example, when you all were talking about a loved one who needs treatment and has an issue. We might be anxious, we might be angry. It could be used when you're feeling triggered by someone or something, or just for whatever reason your nervous system feels anxious. This particular breathing exercise helps the anxiety come down in the body. So what you would do is pull yourself away from a situation where you're highly triggered first. If you can pull yourself away and then get in a room, a quiet room, a little meditation music is fine. Make sure there are no distractions, because distractions will pull your attention away from this. But essentially, you just take your right thumb and you plug your right nostril. so that you can breathe only
Ooh.
through your left nostril.
Not conducive for these nails. I feel like I'm.
Yeah, right.
So plug your right nostril.
Hmm. And then you're going to breathe in through your left nostril, and you want to follow the breath, like watch it come down and even into the diaphragm and stomach if you can, and then watch it leave. So you're literally just plugging that right nostril, doing left nostril breathing, and watching the breath. Now, so you just keep doing that, and you would do it for like 3 to 5 minutes. Doing it for 3 to 5 minutes is what really helps to calm the nervous system down. And for people who want to know some of what's going on there, is that when you're watching breath like that for a period of time, the breath is empty. There's no thoughts in it. So it helps the mind go empty, which brings the peace. And then the breath itself is soothing to the central nerve, to the nervous system. As you bring the breath in, it soothes the nervous system. It sends a signal to the nervous system that you don't have to be in fight or flight mode at this point. You can now relax. And then you can go back to that conversation or that argument with a different clarity. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you a question. Did you tell him to close his eyes? Because I was breathing with my eyes open, but Dave went to sleep.
Yes, I was.
breathing.
Matter of fact, strange. Suddenly, I did really calm down.
That's funny.
And I was perfectly ready to have a level of constructive criticism about this particular exercise, but suddenly,
no, you can really feel.
I'm totally relaxed.
Let me say this, and I would like to report as well. I'm glad you reported what you were feeling. The key for me was following the breath.
Yeah.
That's what got me. Like when he said, so when you say this and you breathe in, automatically that really following that breath, sucking through one nostril, going all the way to the bottom, and then exhaling out. It's like, whoa.
Wait,
okay.
so here's the extra benefit that you guys had from watching this particular show today. You actually had Scott himself with a very calming voice kind of talking as I was doing the exercise. After a while, I was actually literally, as you said, to actually follow the breath, I started envisioning like a plume of air coming out of my nostril, and then suddenly I could almost see my face in reverse, like a negative. I can see my eyes, I can see everything, and I can actually see what was going. And it was that visual that my mind created. I would assume that my mind was creating it because I couldn't see. That was actually also a very calming scene that my mind just created.
I probably didn't get that far because you actually closed your eyes.
Exactly.
I was looking at Scott.
And I can imagine doing that for a longer period of time would be extremely helpful.
Yes. Well, also, if you just know, I don't know if you noticed this, but what's happening is when the mind goes quiet, because thoughts are always about the past and future, usually, or some argument about what's going on, but they're generally past or future thoughts. So when you're watching your breath, you're coming back to the present moment. So it's from presence where we have a greater clarity in relationship, from presence, and not always in our head when we're talking to people, like coming from presence. And I think that's what you'll notice when you do that, is that your mind will calm down a little bit and you'll feel more present to the moment. And that's a good place to engage with others, being present.
Now, go ahead.
Stories.
I'm sorry. I didn't want to mean to cut you off. So again, is most of mindfulness based in breathing and following the flow of the breath in and out, and understanding that to help center you on the here and now versus, like you said, past and present thoughts?
Well, it's really only for us. It's only the beginning. It's most of our work goes way beyond that. It's something that we do with people in the beginning, but we actually go into a much deeper process where we observe thoughts and bring up feelings and allow them. And it's much more complicated than I can explain here. But breathing is a big part of mindfulness generally, but we've developed an entire protocol that goes beyond that. So it's really just the first stage. We try to help people pick up that practice just to get a sense of being present, and then we take them deeper.
Right.
Awesome, man. So that's Scott Kiloby. It's the Kiloby Center for Recovery, the Mindful Revolution in Addiction and Treatment. Call 866-545-6295 or email info@kilobycenter.com. Get your 5 steps to calm your nervous system and much more. We plan to have our whole family down there to get the whole pie healed sooner than later with our friend Scott Kiloby. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Bad.
Worthless.
Don't trust them. They'll hurt you. You're worthless.
It's pointless.
When the pain of schizophrenia meets hope, everything can change. Help someone who is struggling by supporting the National Alliance on Mental Illness and be a part of the NAMI effect. Hope starts with you.
It's raw, real, and unfiltered.
Well, as we promised, everybody can receive their own tips. Please do continue to call and email and get your information, get your 5 steps to recover your nervous system. Scott, as we say all the time, I want to just also go off and just say to everybody, I think one of the most important things about having Scott come once a month to our show is to remind everybody that you're so not alone. There really is help in a place where most of us have learned to feel helpless, and starting with ourselves. And so I'm grateful for the education. I'm grateful for the awareness of just what's possible with certain practices. And I was sitting here listening to you, and I was thinking, man, Scott is teaching me to be a mindful sprinter, but right now I'm just learning to stand up on my own and get my balance.
And like Scott said, this is just the beginning. He's showing us very introductory methodology when it comes to mindfulness. But if you visit the Kiloby Center for Recovery, it takes you much deeper. And again, it's not just for those of us dealing with addiction or co-occurring mental health issues. It's for the whole family. Anyone who needs to actually deal with the stress of life. This pandemic has wreaked havoc on society. Scott, give us one last a word to close the show.
I would just say on the breathing exercise, something you can do, I want to let people know, is just in the middle of the day when you find yourself in your head, take a few breaths and watch the breath and see what that does. Because it can help you just let go of something, so that it's not just something that you do at a certain time in the morning.
In a crisis,
throughout
right?
the day.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. So again,
thank you so much, Scott. Every time you come by, you drop goose eggs of wisdom and calmness and kindness, and I promise you, you leave nuggets that are very valuable to me, and I'm sure others.
Absolutely. We thank you, brother. Thank you. We look forward to best of everything.
I'm going to move to the woods, and I'm going to learn to talk calm like you.
We will learn to be as peaceful as our guru there. Scott Kiloby, all jokes aside, the Kiloby Center for Recovery, the Mindful Revolution in Addiction and Treatment, and the Natural Rest House Detox Residential Center. They are our sponsors for the day. Scott's given us a lot of knowledge. Again, call 866-545-6295 or email info@kilobycenter.com. Get your 5 steps to calm your nervous center, as well as we want to remind you that next week we are on vacation. We will again return
on the 12th.
The following week, July the 12th. Thank you again, Scott. See you next time. We appreciate you, brother. And see you guys next time as well.